Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for season 3 of Library Lunch and Learn. I can't believe it. We're so excited to kick this year off with our leadership and business edition. And we are excited for a whole other year of great programming in all different nonfiction categories. Remember, this is a bi-monthly program specifically tailored to library staff. Our goal is to introduce you to some illuminating and informative new books and support your work in reference and reader advisory services, collection development, and programming. This series features guest authors, editors, and librarians, and in this episode, we turn our attention on leadership and business, and we're very excited for you to join us today. Just want to give you a quick run through of what you can expect on this program today. After we hear from our wonderful librarian, we're going to hear from an author. But first, we wanted to just remind you of all the, not all, but a lot of the great leadership and business titles we have. And again, like always, we will send you an email at the end of this session with all of the wrap-up notes and with an Edelweiss collection of all these wonderful titles and about all the titles you hear about during the program today. After our librarian guest, Morgan Perry, we're going to hear from Kevin Carter, who's one of the co-authors on Racial Justice at Work. So we have a really action-packed hour for you today. Please, as always, put any questions you have into the chat or into the Q&A. And if there's time at the end of each speaker, we'll try to get a chance to answer your questions for you. Thank you again for joining us, and I will turn it over to you, Miriam. And thank you, Morgan, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so pleased to be here today and introduce our colleague here from Library Land. Morgan Perry is a Community Resource Coordinator for Mid-Continent Public Library. A founding member of the Square One Small Business Services team, Morgan is dedicated to making connections between the library and resource partners across Kansas City and beyond. Her passion is taking the library out of the branch and right into the heart of the community. And Morgan's innovative work with food businesses has been featured in 2 different books, Kansas City Food Trucks, Stories and Recipes, and the American Library Association publication, Round the Table, Food Literacy Program Resources and Ideas for Libraries. Named a 2022 Library Journal Mover and Shaker, Morgan is the incoming chair for the ALA RUSA Brass's Business Reference in Public Libraries Committee. Here today to talk about economic health, community engagement, and her commitment to increasing equity in access, we are so privileged to have Morgan Perry join us today. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much for that great welcome, and thank you all so much for joining me. First slide, please. So really the title of this presentation is What's a White Lady to Do? But that's a little uncomfortable to read as a first slide. So I chose the general, but what can I do about it? Because I know that we often feel this way in life. Like we see things on the news, we hear our friends and our family talk about things that happen to them, not just in the workplace, not just at libraries, but everywhere all the time. And it's exhausting for everyone. So we're often left with this feeling, what can I do about it? Slide, please. I'm the current community resources coordinator at a branch. I spent 8 years working on the Square One team at Mid-Continent. I was part of the Urban Library Council's cohort for libraries serving as entrepreneurial hubs and a couple of other things on this slide. And I want to give you that background to tell you that I work a regular library job. I'm not ensconced in an office somewhere in a deep, dark building where all I do is think about these things all day long. Nope. I'm putting books on shelves 2 hours every day. I'm checking materials out. I'm helping people shift through the board books or the Vox books. I'm out in the stacks, and still I have been able to track these lessons that I've learned over the last few years. And in a little bit, we're going to get to that point, and I'm going to show you some of the critical moments in that 8 years and how that led me to the next step in this journey. Slide, please. So Here's the thing. It's only 15 minutes, but there are going to be times when you're uncomfortable in that. And that's really important. It's very important sometimes to be uncomfortable and then think about why you were uncomfortable and then check in with yourself in 72 hours and be like, am I still uncomfortable? That's important. So I'm going to apologize and at the same time tell you you should be a little uncomfortable. We're going to talk about economic health today. And for some people, that's going to be a new phrase in public libraries. But really, we're concerned with the health of our communities, right? And sometimes for us, that looks like a program with the health department on healthy eating, or it might be bringing in a registered nurse for tips on how to control your diabetes. It could look like a lot of different things, but there is also economic health. And when we think about the system of the world and how we navigate our place in life, this is one that gets left out. And it's the key to a lot of why we don't have equity. Slide, please. To give you some context around this, Square One is an economic empowerment team. And we want to not only help individual customers, at the same time, we wanted to help the community as a whole. And that looked like providing access to development opportunities. So that's a little bit different because it's not just informational programming. There's instruction going on, there's intervention going on in decision making. It's a little bit more complex than that. Slide, please. One of the things we did to help us in this journey is get very specific about our target audience. And I want to encourage you to think about this because we're under pressure to say that we help everyone. And yes, no one got turned away at Square One while I was there. It was 8 years. We didn't turn people away. We often made referrals for people for more specialized support, but no one was turned away. But when it came to the focus and the designing of services and programs, we needed a target audience. And we didn't say it out loud for the first 4 years. It was really not until year 5 that we began to be comfortable saying, no, this is who we're designing for. So we chose, after we mapped our ecosystem and saw what was available, that man, the academic rigor on some of this stuff is pretty stiff. Like, I'm not comfortable sitting through these classes. What can we do to provide access? So not just availability, access. We might be talking about the same subject, but we're doing it in a different way. So we focused on people that don't succeed in traditional learning environments. And guess what? When you use those adult learning techniques, it's better for everyone. So we began to see that we got those new customers in, we got those new people in from the community that really responded well to this, that it opened information up for them. But we also got people that came and stayed, that had master degrees, that had doctorates, and they just liked it. Because making information relevant to the people who need it is good for everyone. Slide, please. One of the key moments at Square One was realizing that outreach and community engagement are two separate things. And I'm not going to belabor this point because if you're in this virtual room today, you probably have already heard this. Community engagement becomes important when we're talking about equity because the process of working collaboratively with our community members to address issues for the betterment of the community. That's the key. And we'll get into a little bit more of that in a couple of minutes. Slide, please. So when we're looking at this, and we're beginning our journey with what's the equity work? What does that look like for me? What does that look like for public libraries? This isn't just a one-off program. It's not just a committee, it's not just a discussion, it's not just a really great social media post you share one time saying that you're going to do a better job. This needs to be woven throughout what you do on a daily basis. And that can seem really overwhelming. So I just wanted to take a moment to show you how we were able to weave it into the fabric of our other business programming. So what you're looking at here are just a couple of pictures. The first one is for the food truck face-off. Great event, lots of communities. We really launched these food trucks. We wove equity into that by making it for like 10 competing food trucks, but offering them a personalized education plan to go with it that they collaborated with us on and was taught by people who have already been in their position. Next down, and believe me, I didn't know 10 years ago that I was going to tell you that I'm a business librarian for romance writers, but that's what happened. That picture down from there is Romance Genre Con, which not only offers fans the chance to get in the room with some of the top romance authors. That's Tessa Dare right there on the end, and Vanessa Riley in the back. You also get to learn about your industry. So there's not a lot of opportunities for women writers, particularly women who are writing romance, to get the business education that's available in larger metros. So we brought it in and we got very comfortable with saying what we were doing because we're still in a public library. There's still a big stigma against romance, but we decided it was important enough that we needed to message about it. So no, these are entrepreneurs. These are not people selling smut. These are people writing books. Next over here, you see the El Centro picture. We took curriculum we already developed, worked with business consultants that have language access programs, and made it available in Spanish with community partners. So we were able to take work we've already done, make sure that it fit for the culture that was our new target audience, and then work with other people in the community to make that offering available. And then at the very bottom, you'll see Black women in technology. That purely came out of a observation on a technology business panel that we were doing in 2020, and we went, wow, there's just dudes here. What else can we do? And then we made a plan and took action. So this subject isn't just for a one-off. You can use it in lots of different ways. Slide, please. I didn't start out thinking about these subjects. So in 2014, when Square One launched, we did maybe 2 programs that year. And it wasn't until the next year that a partner from the city of Kansas City did a very brave thing. He approached me and asked me straight out, Morgan, why are all your speakers white? And it was one of those moments where I hadn't noticed and I knew I hadn't noticed and I knew I needed to do something. And we've all kind of been there before. And the important thing is to try it on. So down this list, this timeline, to show you how I got to where I am today, and where I am today is not finished by any stretch of the imagination. There were moments and conversations where I needed to be open as a person, and that is critical for doing the equity work inside of this subject. You have to be able to listen. You have to be open to these messages coming in. Try it on. You don't have to buy it and take it home, but you do need to try it on. So not only did I have that, I had interaction after interaction after interaction, and it became like a journal. And it helped me get to the place where I needed to be, to where I could support other people. Slide, please. A lot of that is scary. Scary conversations for everyone, but really critical ones, because those conversations led us to do the work that you can see Godfrey Riddle here from Civic Saint talking about, the power of public libraries and how we can close this gap around equity. Slide, please. And then maybe the most powerful feedback we got is from Gabe. And Gabe is actually at another resource organization in Kansas City. And he said he could trust us with his people. That's amazing, right? That's what we talk about when it comes to community engagement. Oh, there's this lack of trust. I can't get where I want to go because people don't trust me yet. So if you can find the people and put the work in to get the trust, now we're ready for impact. Now we're ready to listen. Slide, please. So this is the thing that I don't think people tell each other, and we really need to tell each other this thing. The graphics are a great place to start. We've all seen it. It's the kids. They want to watch the baseball game. There's a big fence. And that's how we illustrate the difference between equality and equity. But then we stop. And the conversation, even though it's hard, the conversation has to go beyond that because it is more than that one thing. This equity work is huge. And it's hard, and you've got to do homework to get ready for it. And we need to go beyond that cartoon so that we can see that it's not really equity work if we're not bringing in that customer, if we're not bringing in the community to do it with us, because that's where we begin to fix what went wrong. That's where the healing begins. We have to give our power to those whose power was taken away and work together. Slide. But you're not ready to do that. And in my case, I wasn't ready to do that until I could accept my whiteness, until I could see what white culture is. And this is the part that gets really uncomfortable for a lot of people. Dr. Nicole Cook has this wonderful book that I encourage all of you to look at. You have to do your homework before you can do the actual work. You have to work on you, and this is hard work. Take time, take care of yourself while you're doing this work. The problem is that when we run forward with initiatives and we haven't done our homework, the work is not authentic and people know. And it may start out great, and then 3 years in, you realize there was no foundation. And so I challenge you to look at this idea of cultural humility and start to work with yourself on it. Slide, please. The other thing that's really helpful in this work is mapping your ecosystem. Don't just duplicate someone else's work because it sounds fun. Really take a look at who's not being served in your area and how can you fill those gaps. Slide, please. Another great resource is Dr. Del Gines. He was with the Federal Reserve Bank, and he's very honest about making it about your customer, not about you. Morgan may not want to work with churches, but Morgan knows if she wants to reach Black female customers, she might need to go to their church because that's where they put their credibility. And in order to serve our customers, we have to know our customers, we have to listen to our customers, and we have to make it about them, not about us. And Dr. Del Gines gets there faster than other people. Slide, please. So here's a short list, and look at this list at your leisure later if you would like to. But I want to point out that it has listen on it twice because that's a huge point. If you don't listen, then you don't know, and you're just doing stuff because you want to do stuff, and that's not equity work. Equity is bringing people in and sharing that load and sharing the power. Slide, please. My ask for you today is that you reach out. If you didn't like something, if you want to know what that whole romance author thing was about, whatever it is, please reach out. Please have these conversations. Tell your story. Find a safe place to ask questions and ask, because this is not the kind of work that you want to get 3 years into and then go, oh no, I didn't do my homework. So if you need someone to talk to, here's my email address. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook. Please reach out. I shared this picture with you from the business of chocolate, which we also made about equity. because this is really who I am. And I want you to know that I want to be a safe place for you to ask a question if you need to, or I wouldn't have taken the risk of talking about this subject today where so many people could hear me. Thank you so much for your time, and please, I'm serious, ask the questions if you've got them.
Thank you so much, Morgan. That was so informative and nothing, I am such a practical person and I love so much when people have practical solutions and practical ideas and creativity. It was very inspiring. This might be your last moment to put a question in the chat if you have one for Morgan. If not, of course, we will be sharing all of this contact information at the end, or probably later this afternoon in your wrap-up report, but you will be able to contact her directly as well. So Miriam, did you have anything to follow up with? Oh, I think you're muted. Happens to the best of us.
Apologies, Morgan, just so grateful for you for sharing your insights and experiences, and also the call to action.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for
we
having
did
me
get
on today.
one, yeah, we did get one question in the chat. I think we have time for you to answer one quick question. How do I do this when I am low on the totem pole? So that's
Mm,
an important question, actually. Sometimes people
yeah,
don't feel
it's
like their
huge.
ideas are being listened to. Yeah, great
Yeah,
question.
that is the reality of everyone's organization. If there are more than 3 people, that happens, and I very much identify with that feeling. Here is something that you can do right now, and that's start a one page. And when I say one page, I mean put your thoughts down, put your evidence and your research down, make a plan and formalize it, and then start to tailor that to the people above you and accept that this might be a long way. One of the, I think number 5 on my list of things to do was make sure your organization is ready. And we didn't talk about that, but that's a huge barrier, is making sure your organization is ready for this work. Because if you start doing this work and then you find out that you have policies that are racist, or you have policies that are harmful to marginalized communities, that's not going to go well. So put it down, make that plan, get some feedback on it from other people in the industry, not necessarily other people in your organization. And then I'm going to suggest you do a really brave thing, and that's go to the biggest detractor first. Whoever you feel like in your organization is least likely to want to hear this, start with them, because that's going to tell you every single thing that they're going to throw at you if they're not going to be on board. And then you can start to prepare for it. But this is more than just a conversation. It's a proposal, it's background, it's evidence. You collect what other public libraries of similar funding status and size are doing, and you put together your proposal. Because once it's real, once it's on paper, once it's a document, it
Mm.
has to be taken seriously, because that means if it gets put in a desk somewhere, there's proof. And so thank you for being so brave with that. That is an awesome question.
That is an awesome question. Thank you. And Morgan, thank you for honestly, again, your practical advice and your wisdom. And like we said, you'll be getting all of these slides, so you'll be able to take some of that advice that Morgan gave to you, and you'll be able to save it and have it in front of you when you need it. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was wonderful, honestly. While I switch the slides, I'm going to have, while I switch presenters, I'm going to have Miriam introduce our next wonderful guest speaker. And go ahead, Miriam, while I do this.
Yes, thank you again, Morgan. Our next special guest is Kevin Carter, the Principal Strategist for the Winters Group and one of the co-authors of Racial Justice at Work, practical solutions for systemic change. With more than 25 years of experience as a diversity leader, he has specialized in DEI strategy development, knowledge transfer, and coaching. Kevin helps companies address diversity and inclusion challenges and opportunities, including changing demographics, attracting and retaining top talent, next generation leadership development, and workplace collaboration. He holds a BA cum laude in philosophy and public affairs from Vanderbilt University and an MBA in finance from the Case Western Reserve University Weatherhead School of Management. Here today to talk about the two chapters that he's authored, Anticipating Resistance and Addressing Resistance. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you very much. You all can hear me.
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
good. So
Yep.
it's a pleasure, and I really liked the some of the things that Morgan mentioned. A lot of them mentioned, but particularly around this idea of cultural humility. You'll see how that plugs into some things I'll talk about. Then also mapping your ecosystem, really, really important. Um, the deck that I pulled together, you can tell I'm a very, very process person. There's a lot of information in there, and I think it's organized in a way that you can use it in a very practical way going forward. When I think about leadership, I would say really kind of three things. One, can I connect dots? In terms of information and data that I get from a variety of places, can I connect some dots in order to create a way forward and a vision? And that would be number two, kind of creating vision from connecting dots. And then the third piece of it is, now can I inspire people toward that vision? And I would say the big thing that comes into play when you think about how do I apply leadership toward equity work, it is that equity work can be very emotional. It can be very draining. It can be very polarizing. So there's an element to leadership that that I find that I need to add to this work that'd be different if I was leading a software implementation or doing some other kind of sort of activity. To me, centering justice, which is about providing equity for other people, does involve this emotion, exhaustion, polarization, also exhilaration and excitement that I'll need to be able to manage and really to prepare for. Next slide. So with that, I always say, and this is a quote for the book. The book just came out in early February. I'm one of, I want to say, 11 authors. I did 2 of the chapters. Really excited by the book, and it is about practical knowledge. The quote that I have in there is that leaders centering justice are an organization's emotional immune system, the non-anxious, committed, and affirming presence, holding themselves and others responsible for self-reflection, personal growth, and action. And I think that's the added piece. I always say, can I be that non-anxious, not non-emotional, not non-caring, but can I be this non-anxious, committed, but then also affirming presence for other people that we can have success in this work? And I think there's things that I try to do that we talk about in the book that are personal, self-reflection kind of work, and then there's some practical work, and we're going to talk about a little bit. You're going to get a lot of that, and we're actually going to do some experiential things as well that I think that I'm hoping you're open for. Okay, next slide. And so we might say at the end of the day, I would say, what am I trying to do as a leader? And I would say in this work, what I am trying to do as a leader is I want to feel I want my direct reports to feel like I am fostering their interdependence, meaning that we are to some degree dependent on each other as we do work, but I appreciate their independence such that we're interdependent. They're not totally dependent on me. I'm not totally dependent on them. I appreciate the uniqueness that they bring. So one, I want to foster this idea of interdependence. The other is I want them to feel like they can maintain some beliefs and attitudes in the face of pressure to conform. We want to talk about that, and I want to bring that out because, boy, if you're coming to work every day and you think you're sacrificing your beliefs and attitudes and your values, probably not going to stay there long. So it's something really, really important to talk about. I do want to sort of foster this idea that we can resolve problems rather than to let them fester. Also want to be able to foster an environment where people can self-validate, meaning that I'm working with them, whether it is Myers-Briggs, whether it's LIFO, whether it's some other tools. I help team members create leadership plans. It's about validating what's unique and special about you, because the more you see that in yourself, the greater the possibility that you see it in others. And this idea of self-soothing, how do I become more relaxed? How do I fill up my tank? What does filling up my tank look like? Be able to sort of tolerate some short-term discomfort or gratification for long-term growth. Everything is not about it satisfying an immediate need. It also is, and I think this idea around, again, cultural humility, putting yourself in some area of discomfort in order to grow, particularly long-term growth, and then taking action and be an owner. Taking action and taking ownership for your actions. How do I feel like at least I try to accomplish that? One is to foster a culture of psychological safety where people feel like they can say what's on their minds. We can learn from each other's mistakes, those kinds of things. That we are working on a personal and professional development opportunities that they care about, that emit from their desires, particularly if that emits from the leadership plan, the leadership model that we develop together. Really going to be encouraging some self-reflections. And sometimes that self-reflection is, why did that cause me? Why did that cause me anxiety? What might I be fearing? What might be a fear of loss that I'm thinking about in terms of an activity? Being good about setting clear expectations and boundaries. What is good work? What is not good work? What is appropriate behavior for the work that we're engaged in? Also, just kind of appropriate boundaries when it comes to work-life balance, and the degree that you take work home in the evenings or the weekends. I think there's time to work in the evenings on the weekends. I'm a kind of person, I work all kinds of hours. I tend to try to just work when it's needed, but really want to try to establish what has got to be that work-life balance for you. And then I want to model a differentiation myself. I want to be clear around what I think is special about me. I want to be really clear around what are my beliefs and attitudes that drive my work. And so, kind of in a nutshell, if I would say, boy, if as a leader, I am fostering differentiation in terms of this is kind of what it looks like, this is how it might be accomplished, I think I can motivate people toward that vision from the dots that I kind of connected. And feel free as we go through this, you can put kind of chats in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'll pause for a moment and we'll just kind of talk through some things. So that's kind of, I would say, my leadership philosophy in a nutshell. But now it's a question of sort of kind of what are all the things that interact with that, and how do you make it really pragmatic? Okay, next slide. And so one of the things that I do in my work, and I said that this work is emotional work, and one of the things that I start with is something I call like insight dialogue. And insight dialogue is a relational meditation tool that I use. Because if I say, hey, I'm going to be a non-anxious, committed, and affirming presence, how do I bring that into a meeting? And so many times I will start a meeting with insight dialogue. I talk about a little bit about this in the book, but we're going to practice it right now, and you may feel that it is hitting you really right at the right time. So we'll do it a lot quicker than I normally do it. So first, I would ask you to please close your eyes. And I want you to kind of focus in on your breathing. And as you breathe in and as you breathe out, I want you to let go of a thought or a memory you may be clinging to. Allow yourself to consciously stop and be here and be here fully with us. Now maybe just kind of scan your body, attempt to calm your body and mind. There may be tension in your eyes and your hands and your shoulders. Want to let go of that. There may be agitation, reactivity, and anxiousness that's in your thoughts. Want to encourage you to try to let go of that. If you're kind of pausing and relaxing, that does foster openness, kind of this attitude of non-judgmental receptivity, this ability sort of to better connect with yourself and others as you do that, engage in that cultural humility. Want you to reflect on the word and the feeling of curiosity. Reflect on the word and feeling of curiosity. Use the reflection to ready yourself to notice and yield to change, to grow internally and externally. Want you to listen deeply now. Commit to listening deeply. You do this with calmness, openness, curiosity, to be really receptive to not just my offerings, but any offerings of people that might make in a meeting. You're unhurried by your personal agenda. This listening deeply is done with the heart as well as the mind. It builds trust, it builds goodwill, and it makes it safe for others to open up and be vulnerable. And then I always tell people, also want to speak the truth. And what I mean by that is commit to speaking the truth, meaning the courage to put words to your subjective reality. You're putting words to your subjective reality, but you do so with kindness, discernment, and honesty. You say what needs to be said, but you do so with an idea to kind of foster insights and connecting with others for a way forward. So you can open up your eyes now if you did close them. That's insight dialogue, but the reason why I shared it was we always have these ideas that we think about what leadership looks like. If mine is about being that non-anxious, affirming, and committed presence, you would ask, Kevin, how do you go about doing that in a very practical way? Insight dialogue is one of the ways that I do it. We talk a little bit about it in the book, but I kind of wanted to share this with you so you get some examples. Next slide. So essentially, this is really powerful slide. It combines 3 models all into one. The first model that you see is the intercultural development inventory, and that is how people typically respond to cultural differences. And they could start at denial, meaning all of a sudden we're going to do equity initiative at our organization. I'm in disbelief. I'm in withdrawal. I cannot believe that we're going to do this. So this idea of denial. The next might be polarization, anger, blame, because now I need to maybe do something different than I've done it before. Now I need to validate something about somebody else that I feel is inaccurate. So I may be at a polarization state. Next, to kind of pull out of polarization, you might think about minimization. Let's focus on the things that are common, that we share in common. To come out of minimization, now you're focusing on the things that are different about us that are important, differences that make a difference. And then finally, as you're practicing acceptance, you learn new skills, new abilities, and then you move into adaptation. Well, that is sort of the IDI part of this chart. What's also in this chart, many of you may know ADKAR, and ADKAR is one of the most used tools to drive success in terms of change management. It would say, well, if you're facing denial, are you raising people's awareness? If you're facing polarization, are you focusing on win-wins that raise people's desire? If you're at a place of minimization where only people only want to talk about commonalities, are you sharing, you're helping them grow their self-knowledge, their self-uniqueness, so they can begin to see that in others, which moves them into acceptance. If folks are in acceptance where they want to learn about others, are you creating a psychologically safe environment where people can learn from their mistakes? And if people now are doing that to a point where they're adapting, they're creating new things, are we reinforcing that through celebrations and goals and those kinds of things? What's really powerful about this chart is most companies, when they want to engage in equity, they jump right to acceptance and adaptation, where you really have to start at denial and polarization. The last model that's in this chart is the Kubler-Ross curve in terms of how people experience grief. And that's why you see the dip, meaning if you don't raise people's awareness of a need for equity, why it's good for them, why it's good for the organization, that polarization is going to feel a certain way. People will be angry. They will be upset. You will feel that in the organization. So it's this idea, have I started there? I know we kind of went through there quickly, and if you have any other questions about it, as a leader, I've got to ask myself at each one of these stages, can I respond appropriately? So if people are at denial stage, can I be able to respond by collaborating on a shared vision, a common agenda? If people are at the accepting stage, can I be able to foster a learning, psychologically safe environment? There's a lot packed in here, but it's, again, it speaks to, as a leader, am I able to create that presence with others and able to do this work? Next slide. And that's why the reason why that's important, because I find when people do this equity work, these are the kinds of the losses that they might feel. Might be around security, might be around competence, might be around relationships, might be around sense of directions, it might be around territory. And how am I, as a leader, going to be able to pause, suspend judgment, and listen so that I can sort of affirm their ability to address some of the concerns, or at least begin to just talk about some of the concerns that they're going to do, that we're going to engage in. Next slide. And so here, and then I'll just maybe just take some questions. I'll go for another 3 or 4 minutes. You can maybe give me like a time check. I would say in order to get equity done, that would mean my leadership is going to take place at a macro, meso, and micro level. Macro is what kind of things can I come up with that make people feel that they're connected to something that's greater than themselves. At a meso level, what can I come up with that makes people, that strengthens relationships, particularly team memberships? And at a micro level, how can I do some things that foster self-efficacy, self-pride, and self-worth? So let's jump, next slide. And then the one after this one. Just so you know what's here, and then this essentially is one of the things you can do at a micro level is really ask your organization, do we have something like a fostering equity universal competency that is not only standalone, such that is there, but that you also have that competency that's embedded at different levels. So one, everybody is held accountable to a fostering equity universal competency. There's specific behavioral expectations at an executive level, director level, manager level, individual level that you see here. And then there's also that same equity, that same competency is interwoven into other competencies like coaching and mentoring others, conflict management. That's a kind of a macro initiative that, as a leader, if I'm trying to drive equity, within an organization, how can I choose something that rises the tide for everyone, that builds momentum for everyone to behave in a way that's respectful for everyone else, but then puts them in tune with, now what might I be doing to better include folks who have been traditionally marginalized? When you see that statement, ensure past harm is repaired and systems change so there is fair treatment of all. So that's kind of a macro level that I typically try to do in terms of leadership. Next slide. And the next one. This is a meso level one in terms of the team. This is performance squared. And so typically, if you are in an organization, if you are in an organization, typically talent is measured typically in terms of, did you do what you were supposed to do? Meaning, so typically performance is focused on one square in the performance squared. This model says, have we looked to make sure that the job description is always meeting reality? This is also saying, are we holding the manager accountable to sort of cultivate the talent? And then it's also saying, are we mindful of how the organization and what the person has to do this job, the structures, the systems, and the culture support the talent doing a very, very good job? So this is performance squared. There's a lot here. Go to the next slide. This is going to kind of share with you an example of kind of performance squared in action, where a manager and the direct report would come up with some job changes. How might we change the job to better align literally what's on paper to what we see in reality? We know we're going to talk about sort of talent maybe changes in terms of are they exhibiting the skills and competencies we thought they had? More importantly, we're also going to talk about manager performance changes. Boy, do we have a manager who is welcoming and listening to a variety of people, not just certain people? Ask, boy, do I really feel like my manager has my best interests at heart? Do I really feel like my manager creates a comfort level and a safe feeling for me to bring up different opinions, particularly those that are different from our group? And then we have the organizational level. So this is kind of an example where if I'm trying to drive equity, we've talked about how the universal competency might impact an organization at an organizational level. This one really gets to how do I impact equity and foster equity at a team level. And then the next one, and one more. And this one is the micro. So here is one where I'd want you to think about. We talk about that leaders renew spirit, they build resilience, they foster well-being. If you had to look at any one of these and ask yourself, what one or two of these could I do? Could I do better for myself? Which one or two of these, boy, you know what? If I had to say, if I had to give that a high rating, you know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, maybe that rating has gone lower now. I would say for me, I'm always thinking about how do I nurture my body and spirit in a manner that fosters hope, empathy, and grace. Another one that's important to me is, do I instill the confidence that people's views and perspectives will be acknowledged and considered? And so when you get this deck, I'd like for you maybe to go back and go, boy, are there some things that I could circle here for me? And then to the next slide. This is actually my template that sometimes I use. So if I'm using that assessment and then I'm trying to fill in some actions that would relate to it, it would be, I utilize heart rate variability, neural feedback to help me manage anxiety and stress because I know that comes with this work. I use LIFO for myself. LIFO stands for life orientation. It helps people identify and discover their strengths. I use this to give people a sense of their uniqueness and their self-validation. Social, this goes back to that mapping your ecosystem. I try to diversify my go-to and surround my sounding board and support network that I had. So these are really 6 actions that I engage in. You can go back to that assessment and come up with some for yourself. This is really micro at individual level. And then next slide. And here I'll just stop and maybe take some questions. So if you, at the end of the day, Kevin, what are you trying to drive? So what are some key takeaways? And so I would say, boy, you know what, leaders really don't succumb to fear-based decision making, but it's hard not to do that if you're not fostering that non-anxious presence for yourself. If you haven't figured out a way to how to sort of both self-validate and self-soothe, and then trusting colleagues' judgment, fostering team psychology, being optimistic, instilling confidence, and then helping team members name its fears, emotions, and concerns. And then I'll pause right there and then just maybe take any questions that you all have. There's a lot here, and I hope you find it useful in a very practical way.
Yeah, this is really informative and great. And again, another presentation that I think you'll all be happy to have at your disposal when you need to reference it. One of the questions in the chat, sadly, is similar to one of the questions that we had at the beginning of the presentation. Elizabeth asks, how does one overcome the fear to speak up because the threat of loss, employment, position, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a two-way street, meaning we are human. So one, it is first to say, why am I seeing things the way that I'm seeing? Is why am I feeling a loss of something? And really explore that and really dive into that. And if you, after doing that, if you think, no, this is really, really valid, then then it's a question of how do I pick my spots? Do I begin to share this with people who I trust, who could help could validate for me, who maybe could speak for me? I would say it's really important though, not to put that all on yourself. If an organization is not creating a culture where you can share those kinds of things, where there's more risk than reward, it is terribly tough. So to me, the first step is self-awareness and challenge yourself, and then look for close allies to share and validation, and maybe you find someone that could speak, raise that on behalf of you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for your insights. Another question that we have is from a manager, how you would recommendations for fostering a team's psychological safety.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that we've done is, we talk a lot about inclusion, but one of the things that we do is we actually turn that into like an assessment where there's 5 questions that relate to inclusion. There's 5 that relate to belongingness, and we get a sense of people and ask them, what would I need to see in order for me to feel like my teammates have my best interest at heart. What would need to be done by my manager such that heard and validated? And we just ask those questions, make sure that it's anonymous, and we get a score around how people, the level of inclusion and openness and psychological safety that exists in an organization, but then also the things that they want to work on. Now, obviously, if your team is like 4 people, some people might easily get a sense of, well, so and so said this, but at least you have a degree of anonymousness, even if it's 4. But that's how we try to do it. We try to be really, we try to ask these people if psychological safety is, I feel heard, we'll do you. I feel validated for my skills and ability, we'll do you. And really try to get data around that we can then talk about, and what kind of changes we can make within the organization. And begin with that leader, that manager.
Yeah, that's great. I love these programs. I feel like they're so helpful and so so practical. And I think when you take a topic this big and this seemingly unmanageable, and you give people like actual step-by-step guidance and instruction and advice, it's really helpful. So thank you so much, Kevin. That was really a really wonderful presentation. We thank you for joining us today, definitely.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you all again for joining us. Our next Lunch to Learn episode is on June 1st, so you'll have a little bit of time between the next one, and the next one is an arts edition, and we hope you'll all join us for that. Again, I know I said it a couple times, but in case you had tuned out, we will be sending all of this information in a wrap-up report and contact information and additional further reading and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you for joining us. Kevin, take care. Miriam, thank you as always. And everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.